I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. And Wendy, would you do the roll, please?
Absolutely. Jim Sheeline.
Here.
Mike Book.
Here.
Tom Kitson. Liram Mimini. Mimini.
Here.
Mimini. I got it. I had to do that in honor of Becky. Tim Bivens.
Here.
Nancy Naylor.
Present.
Uh-oh. We got another mic on here. Hang on.
We've got an echo.
It's that delay.
I got to shut this off.
Wendy, do we need a recorder out here? Or are we okay?
I don't know if this ever happened to you. I had to do an interview on the radio one time. And through we're in open session. And through I don't know whether it was how they were feeding it or whatnot, I got an echo. That was 45 seconds of hell. And I told him, I said, you may think I'm stuttering here, but I'm getting an echo in my ear. And you can't talk. I couldn't talk because, it was like a 3/4 second delay. Yeah.
Just like that.
Yeah, just like that.
You have your radio on?
Kind of like now.
No, I was
Yeah.
I was like on a cell phone.
It's not mine,
or
it's
something.
yours.
I was on the road.
It's in Zoom.
You gotta be on the mic. We're in session. I'm serious. We are in session.
Audio. It's the audio
Okay.
settings.
They're having, we do need.
We're
a recorder.
having
We need to have a
technical
recorder
issues.
out
We
here.
have to have a recorder.
Yeah.
Do we have one? I mean,
Oh,
That's what
that was my question.
we're asking.
yeah, because Becky's off. That's why.
Wendy will have one. It's just that she's got her hands full at the moment.
Do me a favor, and you got Jonathan's text.
Do you have the recorder, Wendy, while you're dealing with that? Doesn't matter which one.
Doesn't matter.
No, if I can figure out how to.
I'm gonna share yours. If you don't mind, get it brought up. No. Because I got a type. You don't mind.
Okay, there's power.
That, I know that.
Okay. I'm assuming that turned that thing on, right?
I need, this is what I need to turn off, but it won't turn off.
No.
Did you text
My
Jonathan?
days, you thought you could see the tape going around.
Sorry.
Who
Yeah.
who do we got? We got
I'd
somebody,
like to even turn it down.
we got Paul on.
Alley House.
Oh, it's Ally. Good morning, Ally.
Don't want to mute her, though.
We've got a little bit of technical issues going on right now. Paul?
So I'm texting Jonathan because
Oh.
there's an extra speaker turned on is what's going on here, and I can't see where to shut it off at, so
It's delayed.
Oh, gotcha. Can you just turn that down or?
I would if I knew which speaker
Oh.
it was to turn down.
Okay.
What was it? Shut it off.
I'm gonna try this real quick.
beholden to how we did it. We closed the gap. And the issue, just like I said on Thursday night, the challenge is that there's not a lot of discretionary spending that we can say, okay, you've got fluff in your budget, Mr. Department Head, you know, we're going to cut you, whatever. Now, we can go through and maybe we reduce some line items elsewhere by small amounts and come up with 30,000. You know, and that's possible. But this was just one area. As we had as the three of us were talking on social services, there was a field that in one of our budget discussions, there was a lot of questions of how that got started. Is this really, you know, a proper use of county dollars, and is this a spot where we could cut? So that's, you know, the three of us heard that, and you know, we made the command suggestion that 30,000 could come out of social services. So that's yeah, they heard an echo.
That's what it was. We heard an echo. We're all
Right.
fixed, by the way. We're all fixed. Everything's going well now.
Super. Thank you,
And to
Jonathan.
answer, Liram, from my perspective, to answer your question, I'm going to tell you, I read the room wrong. I thought the feedback we were getting was that was an area that you all were seriously considering examining. So now that we understand we read the room wrong, now we're back to the table going, okay, as Jim said, if we don't cut it there, we need to find some other cuts here somewhere else.
But regardless of whether or not we restore the full funding, what we did not do and what we haven't done as a committee was approve, you know, the requests, because we've got a new request from Ashton. We had clarification on there because I think we denied them, and then Ashton, is my understanding, they came back with the information that we missed and had some clarification. So there's actually, we have requests in excess of the $10,000 to the tune of what, 115?
115.
Yeah, 115. And so our job, even if we go restore money, we have to figure out how we're going to divvy it up, because we've got more requests than $100,000, which was last year's allotment. Okay, so.
So Jim, what I'm handing out, I thought might be helpful in the conversation. It's just what Becky had tallied up originally, the difference
Thank you.
between the requests and what we had given in prior years. And then the column in yellow is just one option for you. Back to my microphone. To be clear here, I haven't run this past anyone, not Paul, not Jim, anyone else. I just mostly wanted the numbers in front of you so you can start considering options. One of the things I suggested about doing was, especially for the towns, the cities, towns, and villages, is to kind of look at this on a per capita, just to kind of get a feel for, you know, whether we give out, if you want to look at per capita as, quote, a fair way to do it, how would that look? And so the far right columns, the fiscal year 2024 request for Lee County Council on Aging. By the way, they would probably argue that they're not just Dixon, even though they're in Dixon. They would probably argue they serve even the county. So you all can decide if this is a fair way to look at it. But for right now, the per capita city of Dixon, not Lee County, population, which is on the left column, far to the left, is about $4.71. In the past, and according to their current request, Amboy is at $1.76. Village of Paw Paw, by the way, came back and revised their earlier request. They were at $2,500 originally. I asked them to explain the increase over $1,000, and they came back and said, oh, I didn't mean $2,500, I meant $1,500. So that's what you're seeing there. They're about $1.81 per capita, and their crust from the Village of Ashton is at about $10.34 per capita. If, and this is an if, just throwing it out there so you can have it for consideration, if you wanted to look at per capita, Village of Ashton, if you want to put them equal to Paw Paw, at $1.81. The yellow column is the result of that. So they would be at $17.50. That's the Village of Ashton. Pawpaw would be at their request of $1,500. City of Amboy would be at their request and what they got last year, which was $4,000. And then the question becomes, do you add on to the $101,000 that you allocated in the last 2 years? Or do you take and reduce one of those to get to your total that you allocated last year of $101,000? So you can reduce, which is what the yellow column shows. I reduced Lee County Council on Aging just slightly, puts them at a per capita at 440. They would be going down from 69.5 to 67,250, or you can take the difference of that and just add it, and your total would be 101,000 plus what we give to Village of Ashton, which would be about the 1750. More than anything, I wanted to see the numbers as to what we've done in the past years and where we're at right now.
Jim, I have a question. So
Go ahead,
that-
Larry.
So that 30,000 would come off this 101 then? So we still have, then we have to do more cuts.
I
I
think
mean,
the proposal,
you did more cuts on the yellow column, right?
the feedback I got and why I went to 101 is the feedback I got is that you were not interested in reducing the 30,000, that you wanted to go back at the very least to where we were last year, which is the 101.
Then I also, and I'm not, being particular about any town in here. The idea is that how do we go about next year? Like, because we've had this issue all the time. Like, some have asked, do we have to give this money out? Do we have, but honestly, I think we should continue it because I've seen it at work for the elderly. For all the towns, not just Ashton, not just Amboy or Papa. I've seen it at work. I went to Amboy and I saw those guys having lunch over there. Amboy is not my district. I went there one day just to look to see. It was kind of amazing. But then we have other issues, right? So,
Well, and that's always
That's
the
my
push-pull,
opinion, so.
is that, there's always very well-qualified organizations that do amazing work, but at the end of the day, it's our job as the finance committee to figure out how to pull a budget together.
Yeah.
And you have to make decisions. So,
I was just saying
No,
passionately, I just feel that, that group of society is being cut. That's how I see it as a taxpayer.
okay. And that's fair.
That's,
Yeah. Tom, I was feeling you wanted to,
Well, I agree with Liam. We've done this and I think the seniors count on us. And the people that use these, it's not always seniors, and certainly we get into hospice. But I think if we're going to cut this, we need to do it in a future year and let them know in advance before we give them a good warm fuzzy feeling when they talk to us. And we've gotten away from having them all come in here and present. We do it online, we do whatever. But I do believe that some of us, and I'd be glad to go, need to go to the Council on Aging and explain to them it's time for them to start looking and standing on our 2 feet and figure out some way. I mean, they're the elephant in the room, if you will. And they, excuse me, they rely on us.
2/3.
They rely on us very heavily, and I think we need to, but I think to just cut them really sends the wrong message from us. And I think we need to meet with them and tell them what we want to do in the future. I know that doesn't help the 30,000 this year. I just have a problem this being where we cut the money.
They're also in the transition of a new director over
Right.
there.
I think we get a new director, then we
Maybe
meet
that's
with
the
them and
time
say,
to-
hey, look,
Figure out.
we have to get this down some. I'm not saying we cut them back to 5,000 or 10,000, but we need to start working our way down. Maybe they need to do some fundraisers or look at some grants or something, but
so just to be clear, we'd be cut, the cut, their request was 72. At what Wendy has proposed, you're talking $2,200.
Wendy's numbers I'm fine with. I'm just not fine with going all the way down to 70,000.
Okay, okay. I thought you
No.
were commenting on,
I'm sorry.
What
No, no,
Wendy had
I'm good with
put together.
101, but I think for next year, we need to be talking to them soon and let them know that we want to look at next year being, you pick a number,
all right,
50,000 or something, and we help them work their way down.
Tim.
And part of that broader discussion should be, I have the same problem you have. It's full. We had looked at Lee County Council on Aging and about their revenues. And City of Dixon, as far as we can tell, does not contribute anything. So we're the sole entity as far as governmental. And I don't know about the rest of these, but ultimately, county, we provide service. We provide, number one function of government is protected citizens. So we have sheriff's department, we have a jail, and we need to provide those services. The highway, and we have funding for that and all those things. And we have to, at the end of the day, we have to decide, what are we going to cut to? What services can we provide and what should we provide and what extras can we provide? In the overall scheme of things, this isn't a lot of money and I have no problem funding, agreeing to fund it. But the other end of it, to have a balanced budget, we're like $800 to the plus side right now. So we're going to have to figure out where we balance the rest of the budget, where that comes from and what service are we going to cut elsewhere to accommodate what we're doing.
And we got to do it this morning. Guess what? So our meeting just got longer, which is fine. But we are going to have to figure out what we do here. We're going to have to then go find a place in another department where that money, where that $30,000 is coming from. So I guess let's do this. Nancy, did you want?
I was just going to probably say the same thing you are. Can we go look to see where we find it before we actually make a decision on this?
I would say this, my challenge is if you want to keep it the same, then you got to go find, you can't just stand here and say, we're going to keep it the same because I like seniors. If you want to keep it the same, then whoever that is needs to go find and tell us where the money is going to come from. I mean, this is not to say that we don't like seniors, but as Jim pointed out, we're the finance committee. It's our job to figure this out. All these organizations are worthy. You can parade them all in here and they all serve a bunch of people for worthy causes, absolutely 100%. But our job is let's not turn this into we don't want to make hard decisions. So we go make people come in here, give us a bunch of facts that we could already assume exist, that nobody's wasting this money who's getting it. Lee County Council Agent probably isn't. Lifescape. I mean, anybody who's involved with these organizations is an absolute saint, including, and I mean, put us all on a pedestal here, but as finance committee, this isn't an easy job either. There's not a lot of people who want to stand here, have to vote for tough levies, have to do some of the tough things that are required, or be accused of somehow being nefarious with their decisions regarding social services. But that's what we're here for.
Yep. Well, it's just like the 10,000, I'm sure we could have people come in here and say, you're taking 10,000 from extension, you don't want to support kids. And that's not true either. It's just a matter of what our priorities are and where do we find the money? And that's just where we're at. I'm really kind of ambivalent how we want to do this. I hear what you and Nancy are saying, Mike. We can do that. I mean, we could go through and see if we can find 30,000 elsewhere that we plug a hole, or we can say, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do 101,000. Let's go look for the money. It's however you want to do it. Is it the desire, I guess, let's do it by consensus. Is it the desire to keep the funding at last year's level at the 101? Is that where everybody is? Okay, so there's one. Nancy, is that where you're at?
Yes, I'd like to see some of it cut back a little bit so that there's a softer move into next year. It's not going to take care of the 30,000, so.
Okay.
There's
And
where I
and maybe
think-
we don't
and maybe we
get
don't
there. Tim?
My desire is always to have a balanced budget.
Yep, me
which we
too.
have- We have
Well,
right
we don't have a
now.
choice.
And so now, as Mike's pointed out, we have to decide what other service we're going to cut from
Yeah,
who
right.
Yep.
to fund this. Do we cut the sheriff's office? Do we cut the clerk's office? Do we cut I mean, where do we go?
what
What
we
service
find
are we
out.
going to cut?
Yeah.
Are we cutting a part-time employee? So that's where it's at. We're going to be cutting some service from someone else to accommodate this.
That's right. Laram? I mean, the question is, you know, do we go, is this our priority and we're going to go look for the money? But we're going to have to, you know, we got to find the money.
Yeah, but I also don't want to make it sound like I don't believe that you guys have done your work with.
No,
all
you
of
know,
it.
not at all.
I'm not saying
There,
that.
there is no ego between the
But
three
we've
of
done this
us.
through
We
the
just got to get a
years,
job done.
And we don't have to do it. I understand it's not a state statute. It's not something that we have to do, but
Well, let's go look. Let's see. Paul, let's pull up, you've got
Yeah,
the
so-
revenues up.
Yeah, well, this, where I'm at right here is the line item for senior services, right? The 70, where I had 70. You can kind of see where I'm toggling there.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you want to find 30,000, you can do it two different ways. One, we can go through departments and look and see if we can find it piece by piece, right? Maybe it's 5 here, maybe it's 3 here. However, that's fine. We can do that. We can also look at revenues. And is there a revenue that we think we could get more out of? Now there, I'm going to caution you. I really don't believe that there's more than what we have.
Well, it's been enough time since we've gone through this.
Yeah.
Why don't we go ahead and do it? And we'll have a discussion on where our assumptions are right now and why you're saying what you're saying.
Okay.
So
So
let's just,
from the
we'll just zip through it
Yep,
real quick.
yep,
And if somebody's got a question or because, and remember, other than property taxes, everything else is an assumption and that can be moved. But I can tell you that when we went through this, I was pushing Paul's comfort level. I'm just dead serious about that.
And that's, Jim's right there. I mean, we had our discussions and my thoughts aren't always right either. So, if you guys got something, just share it. As Jim said, there's not really, I don't have this ego that says I'm right and you guys have to deal with it. These are numbers that I want to give you data and you have to make the hard decision. So property tax, what we looked at there was with the CPI hanging around, the 6% mark, we're probably going to be able to get 5, which would be our max. So we increased it 5%. So there's nothing there to increase. And if CPI comes in lower than 5, now we've pushed it to 5, so we can't get there. So that's that one. County sales tax, you see this in yellow because we looked at this multiple different times. I had this, in the first iteration, I had this at around 650 and we've bumped it up to 700. Run rate would tell me we could, if the economy's good and everything runs the way it is today, we probably get to 700. You have any hiccup? You don't have any room there. You're at in my opinion, you're at your max. And again, countywide sales tax goes the same way. These two kind of float together. Local use tax is, pretty steady at the 550 area, 510 to
Now,
550.
Paul, just as far as the fiscal year 22, those were final numbers were year.
These
year to date.
are final numbers in 22.
So, okay. And what was that? That 686 is as of,
That was as of June, June or July this year. I can get you, here, we can go, let me go one spot. I'll open up a different file. Come on, I should be online. I'm not online. Okay. So that's why I can't get there. I was going to show you another one that showed the year to date on these. We're probably going to be a little over $1 million this year for countywide sales tax, and probably 675 to 700 in county sales tax. So I was just going to try to get you through what I had for September, but I'm not online. Sorry. Yeah, and then there's small enough numbers. State income tax, we did get a letter that said you'll probably see somewhere between 1.5% to 2% increase. So that's why you see, from a budget of 1.7 in 23 to 2.1, pushed it to what I could. The bigger one is
that's
this.
probably of all the revenue streams, that's one that keeps me up at night. Anyway,
Yes.
Because the state got a whim.
Yeah,
cut
and
that.
can pull it in a heartbeat.
Heartbeat.
Yeah.
The others, barring some fallout, I mean, a big pullback in the economy. I'm relatively comfortable there, but personal property replacement tax, that gives me heartburn.
Yeah, and that's the one that we've been, during the pandemic, it seems like we've enjoyed quite a rise. I mean, from 2020, where it was 448,000 for the year, by 2022, it was 1.5 million. And the other letter that we received from Springfield was that your personal property replacement tax, which is a corporate tax that was brought in during the early 70s during the new Illinois Constitution, that calculation has changed, and they've also, in order to balance the Springfield budget, they pulled 800 million out of that fund to support state of Illinois budget. So anyway, the letter basically says for their fiscal 24, which we are now in through, July, August, and September, we're probably going to see about $1 million. So that's why I highlighted it in yellow, because it's going to be, we're probably going to see, for our fiscal 23, we're probably going to be at about 1.3 million is where we'll end the year at. So up obviously from our budget, but now the 24 is going to be way down. So those are
Another reason that, and Paul's very much aware of this, there was a bill that almost made it, that would have funded, again, out of the personal property replacement tax, all of the constitutional offices, just like Charlie and Clay. The state says that they're funding 2/3 of their salaries, and yeah, to the cost of pulling that out of that fund. And so I'm sure that bill's going to come back. And so again, if they get that passed and signed into law, those dollars to pay the increase in salaries of the constitutional office will come from there.
correct.
So that's another reason why I have heartburn of being any more aggressive than what we were there. And we upped that, because you originally had that at what, 9?
Yeah. So you see over here, I had it at 900,000.
Yeah, oh, there you go. Right.
So I bumped it up to $1 million. But again, I'm pretty confident with the letter from Springfield that we probably should see $1 million this year. I'm just not as confident going forward where we'll see what we'll see from that. But those are your big dollars, you know. I mean, we're looking for 30,000, which in the grand scheme of things is not that big, but you know, when you come through the rest of these, you know, it's possible our interest income, because I am getting over 5% on almost everything that we do have in the bank, could be at more than 150,000 for the general. And that's a possibility where you could bump that even 25. So there you found 25 of it.
Paul, can I add a comment on the property tax side? Just as Paul said, under PTEL, our limitation is 5% or the consumer price index, whichever is lesser. This year, the consumer price index, actually it was last year's consumer price index used for this year's tax levy, is about at 6.5%. So PTEL caps us. Remember, it's the lesser of the two. So PTEL is going to cap us at 5%. There is a caveat to that, and that is that new construction or new development. At this point in time, the assessor's office, this is the traditional time when they're crunching numbers heavily to try and get those new construction dollars into the system. So it is possible there's a little wiggle room there, but I will tell you there's nothing large there because we don't have a lot of big projects coming on. No solar, no wind, no large industrial projects coming on in this particular year. So there is a caveat there, and by your October finance meeting, I will bring forward what I know for a levy that will include that new construction, at least through the October deadline. The assessor's office will continue to enter those in actually right through October, but I can get pretty darn close by then. So I will add a caveat that there's a little wiggle room there, but probably not much.
So it's just like Benel's, the hotels, Chipotle, all those won't, obviously they won't come on in this fiscal year,
Correct.
probably next fiscal year.
Right. I mean, if you think about it, Benel's or Chipotle is hardly, I mean, there's no construction and we don't assess it until it's 100% complete. And in the year that it is 100% complete, it's a partial assessment for those months of the year that it would have been completed and up and operational. So depending upon how long construction takes, it may not even be the next fiscal year.
Right.
But it would take one of those larger companies for it to move the needle a whole lot here. Now, we're still going to have small things, garages, houses, pole buildings, but again, it just doesn't add up to a lot. Unless you have a larger industrial property coming on, it doesn't move the needle much. But, you know, we're looking for arguably 30 or 40,000. There might be a little bit to gain out of that.
So the rest of those items are all minor.
I have a question, Jim.
Yep, go ahead, Lauren.
I'm sorry. On the, I lost it over there. On the county fees, county clerk fees, we went, are those final numbers FY 21 and 22? They were in the 700,000 range. And then this
Correct.
year, we have projected 586, right?
For the budget, yes, that came from, that's Nancy's help with that. But remember, those county clerk fees are, a lot of her fees come from real estate transactions. And then there's an offset in her budget that she has to pay the state for. A portion of that goes to the state. So there's already an offset for that fee. And she is seeing a significant slowdown, if you will, on real estate transactions. That's causing that drop in revenue. Yeah.
And the other thing that was driving that up at one time was the refinances, the recording of mortgages. And that's obviously with interest rates up, that's come to a halt too.
And Paul, that 336, is that year to date to what month though? Is it-
Through June, I believe. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I know that's a big number out there, but it's not one that I would be comfortable changing because it, comes from the department head who knows what they're running and their run rates and what kind of fees they're collecting.
And as we go through we're going to run into, our circuit clerk fees, all of those things. They're going to be hugely impacted by the Safety Act. As we went through that, we didn't spend a lot of time there other than to say, God, we hope we get there. And that's just reality, and we're going to need, I would be very uncomfortable in moving any of those numbers until we have a year under our belt to see how this actually plays out. Yeah, exactly, Nancy.
So again, I kind of pointed this one out, this interest income. This would be money like in CDs that doesn't, it's increased tremendously over the last few years. And you can go all the way back to 2020. We got $5,000 in total interest, right? I mean,
0.1%, 10 basis points.
Correct. Yeah, it doesn't add up. But, through June, we've gotten 115, and I think through September, we're probably sitting around 130 right now, So this 150, yeah, I mean, by next year, I don't see interest rates reducing in our fiscal 24.
No, in fact, the Fed, it sounds like that
They've got one more. Yeah, they've got one more coming yet this year, this calendar year. So, if you're I guess what I'm suggesting is if we're looking for an offset, this could be part of it at least.
So where would you, I mean, you threw out a number.
Yeah, I was saying, you could maybe, this is a real stretch, it go to 175 instead of 150, in your interest income, or go to 160, 165, at least find half of it, right there. There's 15. If you did 165.
All right. Why don't we do that? Consensus of the committee, comfortable with going to 165 on interest income?
Yeah, I like that we're making some rosier assumptions. Now we're moving.
All right, let's go ahead and do that, Paul.
Okay. And like we said, the rest of these down here are more in tune with each department and they're offset. A lot of these revenues are offset by the different departments. This one is real estate tax penalties. That's part of my department. And I have it here at 125. I think before I might have had it at 110. But if you look at run rate says over the last couple of years, we're probably going to be real close to that. And so I don't suggest we move it up by any means. But just wanted to tell you why I highlighted it in yellow. And then some of these are sheriff fees, traffic fees, bailiff fees that come out of the courts. There's a reimbursement that's coming from basically that's our PPRT tax coming down, but being reimbursed to us through the sheriff's department, state's attorney's reimbursement. These, like the state of Illinois reimbursement for probation, that's to offset payroll in those departments. Zoning fees. Now, here's where, this, you can tell this is a hit or miss. I mean, you could be all over the place with this. So I'm not really comfortable. The only comfortable change I'd make on that would be to go down. But, we can keep it there. And that's really it. And then there's some dispatch fees, but again, those offset the 911 center. So anyway, so we found 15, right, in the revenues. Now what you really got to do as we go through this is find 15 grand in expenditures to cover that. And it doesn't have to be in the countywide expenditures either. It can be, obviously we can find it in any department.
All right, before we move on from revenues, committee see anything that they wanted to ask a question on or revisit before we move on?
I'm good.
Everybody's okay with where we're at as far as revenues? Yeah, Dean.
I got one question. I see a lot of fees up there and charges that the county charges. And I know some of them are attached to CPI index or whatever. Has there been any consideration or would it be worthwhile to think about slightly elevating some of our fees over a countywide basis?
I mean, that's a great question, but probably more, some of those are statutorily defined. And then the other ones would be, our department heads or even our finance committee. I know we'd have to run resolutions to change some of those fees as well. So it's an absolute great question. I don't know that you could make a change fast enough to affect this budget.
More of a long term than a short term.
Correct.
Dean, that was
But
going
I
to be,
think that's a really good
idea.
suggestion.
Yeah.
Is to go through and review our fee schedules
Yeah,
and
for
see
those-
where,
For those that haven't been updated in even 3 years, inflation has definitely eaten away at anything you've done there.
Get it done.
that's exactly where I was going to go with it, Dean. I don't think it's a short-term solution, but wow, it is something. And coming from as a department head myself, it was amazing how fast time would fly and you realize, oh my gosh, I haven't looked at that. So I think that a directive to all the departments that says, hey, we'd really like a thorough review of your fee structure for this next fiscal year. Let's look at what we can do, whether it takes a resolution or not. And of course, as Paul said, there are statutory restrictions at times on what this is, but just the analysis would be a very prudent thing for all of us, I think, to do. So I think it's a good
when
point.
will it be the last time that we will have done anything like that?
Well,
Dean?
different departments are doing it at different timeframes, kind of depends on, before I left the assessor's office, I did a thorough review of the GIS fees and you all adopted a higher GIS fee. So it's really kind of up to the independent department head as to when, and usually something triggers it. But I think a methodical, let's all take a look at our fees and would be a very good, prudent
All right.
thing to do.
I can trust that email is going to be going out. this
I will take
afternoon.
care of that, yes. Actually, we're looking to, I was hoping to have the new county administrator in hand so we could have our next department head meeting. And that's gotten slowed down more than I anticipated. So maybe we'll just have a department head meeting on a couple of things that are on my list and that would be one of them.
Sure.
So,
And have them do a comparative study to the surrounding area rather than just,
so sometimes statutorily, you are required before you raise fees to have done that statutory comparative analysis. But I agree, whether it's statutorily required or not, it's probably a prudent thing to do, just because it helps you all as decision makers.
and I know we're doing GS work for the city and they're paying us X amount of dollars. And I asked about an increase, but is that base rate correct rather than just depend on the CPI to adjust it?
So that particular one was is in the process of being renegotiated, but it's very clear in their contract that it's an hourly rate because we're only dedicating X number of hours. So it's an hourly rate that they're renegotiating right now. And then after that, so that time doesn't fly and it doesn't get off our radar, then it's going to be a CPI increase. So, but yeah, that's just one example of the fees we can take a look at. I'll make a note of that.
Thank you. And good catch, Dean. Yep. Go ahead, Blair.
One more try at this. Another question for Paul, mostly informational. We had some ARPA money that was left over, quote unquote, and we put it in the capital.
Correct.
Sarah was in last time and
Yeah,
we
correct.
voted. And is there any of that money that would fit in this criteria besides the business development money that we have to leave on the side and the capital money?
Meaning using ARPA to fill our budget gap?
For the social services? Because I know we used that money
Yeah.
last year for them too.
Well, again, that money is there for the board's discretional use, I guess, if you will. I mean, I know they pumped it into capital. If that's something they want to take a look at, obviously they can. It's not set in stone that it's got to be used. Here, it's got to be appropriated by the 2024, and it's definitely got to be spent by 2026. It's in capital right now because we have so many capital requests, that our capital requests are above and beyond our capital means. But again, we're pulling one, the push-pull theory.
So I guess my answer to your question, Liren, would be the ARPA money is one-time money.
Mhm.
You're talking these requests are ongoing requests. I look at them almost, it's almost like payroll.
I didn't know it all
And-
went to capital. I was just
Yeah.
wondering where did it all
Yeah.
go?
So when we get to capital, you're gonna understand real quick.
Close to 15 million, I know.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and my understanding is we've got movement, we've been carrying that money now for, 3 fiscal years, 2.5. And at some point, as Paul very pointedly pointed out, that's got to get spent. So, and it needs to be, the projects that we've dedicated that for across the street has got to get moving. So, anything else in revenues that anybody wants to take a look at? All right, hearing none, let's move on. Let's dig in. Let's find $15,000 somewhere. Do you want to, let's comment on, I'm seeing health insurance. Let's jump to the transfers. Let's remind the committee what we did in the health department.
Okay, so that's down at the.
That's not a revenue, but it is.
Well, I don't know if you want to call it a cost, but so this 280,000 is a transfer out. That's a support of the health department. Now, what used to happen in the past is some of your property tax was automatically sent directly to the health department. So it did not go to general. It was going directly to the health department. About a year and a half ago, we changed that process a little bit to have most, if not everything, coming into corporate or county general through the property tax. And you can think of that as like a check valve now. So now it's here and you can push it through, right, as to the different spots. This $280,000 disbursement is going to the health department. Last year, or 23, we did 465. 22, we did 465 as well.
So a
But this-
little bit of the philosophy that we've talked about, and we've talked about this for several years on this committee, and that is that the health department had a very healthy budget, a very healthy reserve that
A fund
is-
balance.
Yes, of fund balance. And the philosophy is that that's really county money. It's not just because their grant money is a flow through. So that funding reserve for that department is county dollars, and and they had an amount that we thought could be reduced. So that's why this is really the first stab at really doing a major pullback of their fund balance. And this leaves them, our projection was with Kathy's department, I think this,
It should leave them around 700.
yeah.
So right now they have almost $1 million balance in their fund balance. They obviously, that's money that's just there as a reserve, if you will, right? So if we didn't fund them at all, they could spend through that. Now, that's not the prudent thing to do because we have to subsidize that. We have to fund that. In the past, we used to do it directly with the property tax going directly there. Now what we're saying is, hey, bring it into the corporate, and then the finance committee can determine what kind of funding do they need, what kind of dollar value, but that still keeps them that $700,000 balance is really more like a 6-month expenditure that they have. Almost as we've talked about, and we did a fund balance where we're trying to keep so much in reserve. This would keep them at least a 6-month running rate.
Right. And that's what we kind of, the agreement that we had with Kathy. Now, we're talking, you know, where can we pull $5,000-$10,000? That, and this is why I hate to pick on Kathy, but you know, there's a potential that you could pull off a little bit off of that.
It's an option.
Yeah, we can. All right. Okay.
Sorry, let's just make it something we can look at, come back to.
Okay. All right. We'll make a note of that. And you know, the one thing I will point out in regards to the health department, you know, some of the argument that the health folks made was that, well, we need that reserve in case we have an emergency, you know, national emergency, pandemic and all that. Well, guess what? We had it.
Yeah.
And not only did we have the pandemic, their fund balance actually went up. It didn't go down, and that was because of federal dollars. So you know, it's reasonable to expect that a next national emergency, next pandemic, same thing would happen. So,
Correct,
you know,
correct.
that
Federal.
I think we've, you know, that boogeyman that we thought was there, you know, ended up being the ghost. So, you know, it wasn't the boogeyman, it was the ghost. So, you know, that's my philosophy anyway. So, okay, thanks, Tom. We'll earmark that. We'll go back real quick. The blue number that Paul's got there, just one reminder of what that is, so you know it is. And that's a transfer in from the solid waste. We pulled almost all, you know, by ordinance, we're required to have $2 million in reserve in solid waste. There's 2,337,000 or something like that.
That's what I think the projection would be 2.3, low 2.3-ish by the time the 23 fiscal year will end. Right now, it's at 2.295.
Yeah, so we came to the agreement that we would pull 300,000 out of that. Now, some people might want to make the argument that's one-time money that you're using to plug in gap. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I kind of, my philosophy on the tipping fees is that it's no different than anything else as regards to sales tax. You know, we don't know for sure we're going to get sales tax. We don't know for sure, you know, Republic tomorrow could start hauling garbage somewhere else and our funds go down. They've been trending the last, they bottomed out at roughly 250,000 3 years ago.
Yeah, about 3 years ago.
And they've been trending back up. They've been using our landfill more. You know, so, but we thought it was a safe bet to pull that 300,000 off. You know, that's something, you know, could we instead of 300,000, Tom, could we do 305?
Possible. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Earmark it if we don't find something better.
there you go. Okay, that's why I wanted to point out the blue before we moved on from there. Okay, so let's go to the top of the departments and work our way through.
Yeah, so this would be just your countywide items, more for the board. By the way, this is your bond payment for the LEC, so you know those are pretty solid numbers. I got them from the bank as to what's going to be due in fiscal 24. Property liability insurance is increasing year over year. You know, so if we're looking for something here, I'm not sure you're going to find it here. And then health insurance, this 40,000 is really some of the offset costs for the delta between your $1,400 out of pocket versus your true $6,000 deductible. And again, insurance deductible, we're getting some information from from our providers. Wellness expense, that's, I've said, I don't know that you guys want to touch that yet. That's a itchy subject, if you will. And that's the cost of those programs for the employees.
And that's something that is actually, it comes back to us, but that's paid out of the employee contributions and the county
And
contributions.
yeah, I was going to say the 2575 contributions, that's part of that.
Yep.
Hey, Jim, I don't really have a problem going through county department by department, but I'm noticing that we have Clay in the room and I'm not sure what his schedule is like. And number two, I know we had left off with some outstanding questions for Clay. Do you want to jump to I was going to say the elephant in the room, but I don't, exactly, Clay, I'm sorry.
I thought she was talking about me.
You know,
Only
I
because-
thought we were building the suspense.
Oh,
but if
I
you
see.
wanna
Oh,
jump
I am
right
so
there-
sorry. Build the suspense then. I wanted to make good use of Clay's time here because he's sitting through all of this.
Yeah. Well, I didn't hear any snoring, so, I thought we were keeping it at least somewhat lively.
Yeah,
No,
I can-
great suggestion, Wendy. Clay, I appreciate your patience, so. All right, so we've got, of course,
The salaries, be careful with that. These salaries represent an ongoing cost, does not show any new impact of an FOP agreement that is yet to come.
But it does show the natural step that would have occurred under the current
Meaning,
contract.
yeah, current view, ongoing cost, somebody comes into a new year, meaning they just went from year 9 to year 10, they step down into the next level, if you will. That cost is built in here. So I'm not sure you guys want to really go over that, but
No, there's no point in going over that. We've,
and Clay just walked out of the room, but
yeah. So holiday pay, salary overtime, so as the committee remembers, you can see where overtime landed last year, where it's trended this year. It's still not a positive thing. We haven't gotten that turned around yet, even with all the changes that we've made. So our first grab was, Clay wanted that at 300,000. If you remember, that was his budget request. We were going to maintain that at 200,000. Clay and I we had a good discussion, even with some folks coming, hopefully coming back from the academy. We've still got issues there. So we put it at 240. So we gave them $40,000 back for overtime.
I would point out that line. I haven't been involved in the overtime discussion, but one thing that as I think about it sticks out in my mind with respect to the overtime is the outstanding negotiation with FOP. If you don't see it, and I guess I don't care if I'm speaking on the record, it's an elephant in the room, but if you don't see a successful, if they aren't able to come to terms or not a successful negotiation there, I mean, is it out of the question that you would see people from the department leave and thereby affect the overtime that, you know, we wouldn't be able to do anything about at that time. In other words, we're required to have staffing. If we don't have people or people leave, does that line item get affected?
Do you want to take a stab at that, Mr. Former Sheriff, or I can speak to it, or Clay, when Clay comes back, he can speak to it?
With retention's been has been the issue in negotiations, and we've tried very hard to address that. So yeah, it does impact everything. And it's been ongoing. So that's what you've got in law enforcement today is there's not a lot of applicants to law enforcement. So departments are rating other departments. So and it's happening all over the place.
Right. I mean, and to me, that implies that overtime is going to be a complete shot in the dark here. I mean, you can write 0, you can write whatever number you want in there, but I mean, the underlying question for me is really, at the end of the day, is that a controllable item?
Clay?
And if it's not, then what are we doing? No, and I'll add to that. And if it's not a controllable item, then what are we doing spending an hour on 30K in social services?
Your point is valid, but as we build this, we try to, you know, and once here's the challenge. I guess here's the way I'd answer that, Mike. We try to get as close as possible, because unlike in business, you know, if you don't hit budget, big deal. Okay, you run a deficit. Statutorily, we can't. So we've got to pass a balanced budget, and then unless we have excess revenue, we're required to be there. So it's just like, so your point is right on, and this is a positive for Clay and a negative for Clay, and that was this particular fiscal year. Yeah, Clay blew his budget. And I don't mean, you know, I'm talking reality here, Sheriff, and not casting aspersions. No. But we blew through Clay's overtime line. We had the revenues. We will have the revenues to cover that. We may not, we cannot assume that that's the way it's going to happen next year. So it's very likely that we're going to come back in this next year and have this very same conversation. And it might be a harder conversation because we may not have the revenues to cover that excess in line item. And that's going to be a tough conversation. And so, as Tim said, retention is what you're going to see a contract, once we get a contract with FOP, that we have absolutely focused on retention. And that we hope that long term will help us with that issue, which will in turn help us with the overtime issue. The other part of that, though, is the reality is that sometimes the overtime is driven by circumstances that's out of everybody's control. You don't know when Clay's going to have an all hands. So so we consistently talk about having overtime in control. It's really not. And I understand that. But we do the best we can. That's why they call it a budget.
Right. No, I just wanted to raise that. I think you pretty much agree. Put words in your mouth here saying you agreed kind of with what I said. And it doesn't mean we shouldn't. What I'm saying is it doesn't mean we shouldn't get to good assumptions about where things need to land. It's just putting that out there.
Yep.
For the context of like what we're talking about.
Yeah. So Clay, while you stepped out, I explained where we got to the 240, the conversation you and I had in regards, because we took you back, you'd asked for 300,000 and we took you down to 2 and where we landed at 240 and understand that, you know, and then Mike asked the question, you know, if everything is up in the air, how we're going to hit that and what is this exercise that we're doing and so, but the problem is that once we pass this budget, the only thing that can move us and is we have excess revenues to cover overages in the budget. So as we come through next year, and that's part of the danger in moving those revenue assumptions, because you move the revenue assumptions and you don't hit them, well, then what do you do? And the reality is something doesn't get paid for because you have to, you have to make those expenses.
So my venture here is with social services, for example. If we don't find the money, which we assume there's 15,000 more in interest coming from probably funds and capital from ARPA. My thought would be like, you go under a conservative set of assumptions with your revenues and with your expenses. And then you say, all right, fine, the revenues come in stronger. And I don't know if that has to be a resolution or what form that has to take. We come in and say, fine, first place we're going back to is social service. The assumptions were better than we thought they would be. We needed to make sure that we didn't put ourselves in a bind. But you know what? We were able to do that. And guess what? We're not in a bind. And we're going to go back to social services first to give them the money that we wanted to give in the first place. But we didn't feel like in good fiscal consciousness that we could do that. And I mean, somebody could say, well, that doesn't happen. And Jim, your favorite thing to do is complain that we get requests outside the budget process. But I mean, that would be, in my view, a way to kind of square the circle here.
Paul, you have a comment?
Maybe I could help us all make a suggestion and, we could move on.
Sure.
And say we're done. But let's take a look, instead of going through every department and trying to find 15,000, which I could probably easily just say, here, take it out of the treasurer's office. We'll figure it out. Why not take a look at contingency and just clean that up maybe just a little bit and take it out of there? And the reason I say that is, as I look at that, there's a $35,000 entry that I made in there to help us kind of balance our budget. And that was a shot in the dark, moving stuff through. You could take that to 20 and call it done. Then nobody else is being touched. We found maybe a little more revenue, and then we've upped the social services by 30. And if you want to go ahead and put 10 back in extension, instead of 20, make that 10. I guess I'm trying to, you've gone through a lot of pain here in an hour, and now I'm just trying to save you all from have to go through each department.
Well, actually, as the finance chairman, I love doing this. This is like candy, candy. I thought you were, a numbers guy too.
I do, but I could see that maybe we're losing the group, and I want to make a suggestion. It's just a suggestion, and you guys have to make the decision.
Is it appropriate for me to make an inquiry at this point?
Sure.
Yep. Well, wait, Tim had something first.
Yeah, and whether we have the discussion today or next year, we have a brand new request for this year, which probably shouldn't be considering if we're going to be adding on to social services. That's from the Village of Ashton. You look at the Village of Paw Paw in their request, and there was a one-page request, talks about dances for seniors and bingo. Are we in the business of funding dancing and bingo? Seniors are important. We got at least 3 or 4 of us in the room.
Excuse me?
But I don't think, you weren't included in that, Wendy, so.
Buffet's opening too.
And some of these other ones, if you look at Meals on Wheels, great program. But if you go through the donations, and that's what I was doing as we were talking, in where they get the revenue, there's maybe 4 or 5 churches that are involved in that. And a lot of those people from those churches volunteer and transport those meals. So there's no cost there. But that's something more, there's more than 5 or 6 churches in this community, in this county, that can contribute to that, and they can step up. I don't think if we end up cutting any of this, whether it's today, whether it's next year, I don't think any of these are going to shut down. If you look at, and you can say, well, gee, we need to provide services and distribute around the county, Catholic Charities, they have an ombudsman service that they provide. There's at least 3, I counted 3 places in Ashton they provide that service to. So we are funding them. If you want to look at the fact that I don't believe you have any police department right now in Ashton, the county is providing that service and not charging Ashton. So they're getting a huge benefit there.
And they're taxing for it.
And they're also taxing for it, and they have no law enforcement other than what we are providing. So just to prevent any argument from or answer the question, gee, why aren't we providing services? We are providing services. We're providing a lot of services. Paw Paw, I know the sheriff's, I think you still have a contract with Paw Paw, and they pay for that service. So at some point in time, I think we need to look a little more seriously at what we are providing, and I don't think any of these are going to shut down. You know, it's more of an emotional argument that we're for seniors, and yes, we are, and especially for those of low income that we need, should provide, but there's other means of doing that, I think, privately, and the churches need to step up, and some of them have. And they can provide, if you look at Catholic Charities, they list their assets at about $7 million out of Rockford. So I'm just saying that, we need to look at each and every one of these and goes back to the beginning of what you said. Should we be providing these? When did it start? And we get caught in this emotional argument all the time of, well, we provided it here. We should give them some over here. We do provide services across the board to the county for our main function of protecting citizens and everything else that we do. So those services are being provided. It comes down to how much extra can we do? And we have a balanced budget, so for whatever all that's worth.
Can I add on to that?
Sure, absolutely.
Just, adding on to that, I know that we have an unknown in the FOP and in the sheriff's department. And I echo what Tim says. And also, we need to provide services to our elderly, but the sheriff's department provides protection to everyone in this county. And the services only provide services for a certain segment and percentage. So I'm not against anything. I just feel that to cut the sheriff's department anymore could be scary based on the fact that we can't pay, we can't provide, and then where do we go? And that's just a thought that went through my head based on what you were saying.
So I guess now, as chairman trying to guide us through this maze, and I appreciate both comments, and you summed up, both of you summed up kind of where I'm at. Is that lead us to back to, are we going to fund the social services at the 101,000 area, or are we going to take some money out, draw down some of the money out of that program? And I do kind of agree. I know the chairman and I have had a conversation, and he'd really like us not to cut that. He thought the 30,000 we took out of there was excessive, without having a conversation with these groups saying that the county's not going to, we're looking at budget shortfalls and tightness of the belt, you know, having that conversation to let them know first that a lot of these dollars more than likely are going to be, you know, not going to be there next year, or not at the same amount. I'm guess we're back to what is it you guys want to do?
The chairman favored a 10% cut, did he not?
Yeah, it's not, yeah. Yeah.
It's a 30% over 3 years. My thought is we still need to go talk to these people. I think we owe them the conversation of, Tim, I don't disagree with anything you said, but I think we owe them the conversation rather than just a letter that says, so sad, too bad, you don't get any money this year, ever.
And Mike's, the only thing, you know, I think I'm mechanically, I don't know how we do that. Because from the aspect is, because then you have in the trap of every time that we have a little bit of surplus, well, we've got this obligation over here.
Sure.
And then we're caught in the trap of, okay, now we got to not only make the decision once, but then we got to revisit that and have that same conversation all over again, and try and decide winners and losers and you know, in this area. I mechanically, I just find a little bit of issue how we would do that. Not to say that we couldn't, but you know, we could fund at a level and then say, you know, we're going to fund at 70,000, but if we have more money available, I mean, it's not unusual to have funding, and I'm trying to think of a specific example, and I can't come up with one right now, but there are areas in government that you know, it's always contingent on funding. You've heard that umpteen times.
Well, historically, I mean, some years ago, 10 years ago, these funds weren't an issue because we had influx from the landfill, which kind of ran the county. And I want to say we were around $8 million in the general fund or in the reserve fund, which was there to build a new jail, or if we needed a new highway garage. Those funds came from the landfill every year at like $1 million, if I remember right. And then all of a sudden the landfill went down. We struggled, and we continue to struggle. I mean, we've operated for 4 or 5 years on one-time money has bailed the budget out. And you always think, boy, what are we gonna do next? You know, here we are taking money from the landfill reserve fund. We're taking money from the health department. Not saying we shouldn't, but those are, again, one-time monies that we didn't used to take. And now we're taking that money. So we're still an economic problem. And until we get some kind of revenues coming in, which we've talked about for 10 years, the previous sheriff stood here one time and told us nobody cares about economic development, which was not true. We were all working on it. We were working with Rochelle. But we can't make that happen until it happens. I mean, we can't sit here and say, well, we're going to go out and start a new factory, but we have to do something for these revenues. But in my opinion, we're continuing to slip backwards as we take money from what we do. We used to borrow $1 million out of the reserve fund. And then, well, we didn't need it all. We put it back. So we got one-time money. So we definitely need to everybody's point, we need to be cautious and figure out where we're going in the future. And as far as having extra money someday to add to somebody, God, I hope so, you know, but I don't see it in the immediate future.
No. Well,
Okay.
do we to get the Gordian knot cut here? Let me throw something out. Do we have a consensus that the 101,000, which was the level funded last year, and we take 10,000 out of that and we fund at the $91,000 level, and that's just where we're going to be this year?
I'm good with that.
Is that consensus of the committee?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
All right, so we got 15 We got 15 from interest. We just got another 10,000. Paul, if you want to make that notation,
Yep, I just did.
all right?
Jim, we haven't, we went over a lot of things in budget and we didn't come back to them necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
And then you guys sat down, thank you for doing that, and said, here's where we're at, we'll go back to committee. I guess one I still think about is Kevin Lally asked us for a reserve fund so he could go buy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What was that fund? I mean, do you remember?
That's in capital.
How much-
So we'll get to that.
Okay.
That doesn't have any part of this discussion, but we'll get to that, because remember, we'll get this taken care of and then we'll hit capital.
Okay, all right, so I just want to
Sure.
make sure we're covering all these things before we,
Oh, absolutely,
it.
absolutely.
Email it to you. So you can-
Wendy and Paul wouldn't let me forget that one.
When we're ready, yeah.
So we're at 91,000. So Paul,
We need to find little over $5,100.
$5,100.
And your original proposal, Paul, or not your original, but a few minutes ago, you said you could take that from contingencies and call it done.
Take it out of this contingency and let's call it done.
Sounds good.
I'll just take $6,000 out of that, make that 35 of 29,000, and we're done.
Is everybody okay with that? Yeah.
Not to confuse this, but I want to go back just for a second to social services. I want to be clear. I understand the total amount you want to allocate. Are we adding Ashton in? And at what level? So I know where everybody else is going to land.
All right, so what we'll have to do is that would be our next step, Wendy, is come back and we're going to have to make the call on these requests. So, and we got to pull $10,000 out of the money, out of your pass through. We're just going to have to figure out some more, pull 10,000 out of that.
So I made those changes, Jim, and just to show you, we ended up at $838 for that bottom line.
Okay. Okay. All right, so Wendy, I may have lied to you. We may have to have a brief executive session, just for an explanation real quick. So just give you a heads up, on that, just because I want to make sure the committee's clear. Okay, back to the, so let's get that, the 91,000 done. So,
let's just take Wendy's 1 to 101,000, take 10% off everybody. And everybody
be
feels,
done?
everybody feels the same pain, and is that, well, somebody's got something in there that real passionate about not cutting them 10%.
I have that's nice, clean and simple. I don't have any problem with that. Is everybody good with that? No, we don't need a motion. Okay, it's consensus. Okay, Wendy, you got that? All right,
I do, got it.
I have a request for a break. Let's take 5 minutes. Somebody had more coffee than others this morning. Sure.
Well, if we can retain our people and attract people, maybe we can get to where we can go with that. But wouldn't it make sense, looking at the business perspective? Yeah. Because we have minimum staffing. So there's only so much in the wells, right? Well, I mean, there's always going to be some overtime. Yes, that's. Yeah, but I mean, like. Actually, we're over. So it's like, And we've had some. Possibly, we had some injuries. We had a correctional officer that heart attack, gone for 3 months. We had internal matter where they were off for 3 months. Had another couple injuries where guys off right now on surgery. So, I mean, there are some. And then when you lose somebody, you know, the academy for a correctional is 8 weeks. But then you gotta shadow somebody for at least 2 months to know all the nuances. Yeah, but, and then for the law enforcement, it's 16 weeks. And then they gotta shadow somebody for 3 months before we can put them on their own and they can be on their own.
Again, the same question. So what is the deal that, why don't we let?
I would. Because right now, I've. No.
I'm not against, I'm not judging your budget. I'm not even like, I haven't even like. People that are getting the overtime is for top, but I hate to say this, because we're a taxpayer. I don't blame them. Why would I?
And some of those guys have, and they have seniority. Some of those guys have seniority, so they. Yeah. Yeah.
Stretched, I mean.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that, but we need, for us as representatives, taxpayers, we didn't make, I'm also looking at this as a business.
Right. Yep, there we go. Okay, we're back at it. Where'd King go? Well, we'll move on. All right, we are going to come back to the general fund in a little bit, but Tom had a good suggestion. Ally, if you're listening right now, if you have any questions, feel free to bop in and ask whatever you want that comes to mind. So, all right. So now we're going to, we've got the general fund balanced. We've got one item that we're going to come back and talk about briefly, but we're going to do that in executive session. And we'll do that at the very end. So now can we move?
Here on the side, right?
Can we move into capital fund?
There we go.
Okay, you can see the items there.
So what's in yellow are some of the things that we modified a little bit from the original. And then you notice the last column, sorry, Clay's emailing me. I popped up on my window here. There we go, get rid of that.
Clay, what do you?
That's the thing with sharing my screen. You never know what's going to pop up. So the last column there obviously is a tentative fiscal year 25 because as we've talked through some of the stuff got deferred to 25. So don't be confused by that. The column we're focusing on for right now is fiscal year 24, and the items in yellow are the items that we went back and modified for various reasons. I'm not sure that 100% of them were Jim, Paul, and I modifying. There were other things that were coming in at it. So the Lee County Safe app software, Kevin made a request on that, and obviously that was something we adjusted and deferred to the EMA's discretionary fund. Kevin's original request, as I recall, was
20,000.
was 20,000 in discretionary fund. And so the recommendation is 5,000 in that. And I don't remember, Paul, do you remember what was in his Lee County Safe app or Clay, do you remember? Either way.
I don't recall.
He had something he was requesting for that, and he's actually requested it for the last couple of years, but it has yet to be funded, the Lee County Safe app software, which was a way to disseminate information out to the public. And I don't remember what he filled in there. $4,000 maybe comes to mind, something like that.
4 or 5, I believe.
Okay, all right.
But
So-
basically, you sign up for the application, and then push notices can go out if we have a tornado or some other certain emergency scenario.
emergency.
Now, how is that different, Clay, from what we have now? Because we have notifications. I've been tested multiple
That's the Lee
times.
County employees. This would go to all citizens.
Gotcha. Okay. So people would have to sign up for it. Like I get the marine alerts down in Charlotte County,
Correct.
And so it'd be like that.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay.
So just to run down the things in yellow, just to give you an idea of what changes got made, and then you can go back and take a peek at the rest of it. The miscellaneous concrete projects, this is a moving target. This was a request originally by maintenance and by Tom Wilson. As you can see from the back step here at this building, one of those projects is already ended up getting done for this year. There's something else that's happened, a sidewalk over at 911. So that's a continuous moving target, but we did reduce that a little bit with the understanding that some of those things were going to get done this year. Discretionary fund, this was also a request by Tom Wilson. He wanted a little bit of wiggle room as things come up, things break. He was looking for some sort of discretionary capital fund that they could address it immediately, as opposed to the process right now, which would be to come to Finance Committee and full board in the middle of a year and request it for something that may break down or maybe needed unanticipated. Flooring replacement, that's also been a moving target. Some we think we're going to try and do this year, some next year. Part of that conversation has also been Judge Ackert has requested new flooring for courtrooms over there, but that keeps getting kicked down the road because there's no sense in putting in new flooring or carpeting over there until the HVAC project is done. So again, another moving target. Plaster repair, that was largely for this building. Once again, a moving target. You'll notice last year we budgeted $144,000. A little bit of that was used, although you're not seeing it here because I think it got expended to the wrong budget. But we do have more work in this building with plaster that is bubbling up and peeling off. We just kicked the can down the road by putting some in next year and then some in fiscal year 2025. And I will give that a shot, certainly. Thanks, Lyra. Oops, that might be a little too big because I want to get it all on the screen. All right, so the next one is the conversion of the crimes database. I did check with Clay on that. He did some research and we decided at this point in time that's not a priority for allocating money to. And I don't know, Clay, if you wanted to elaborate, you're welcome to. Nope.
I think you hit the nail on the head.
All right. Bulletproof vests and rifles. My understanding was that someone had a conversation with Clay, and again, in the top 5 priority list, this also, while it's needed, was not a top priority. Is that a fair statement again, Clay?
That was fair that there wasn't room for it in this fiscal year and possibly next fiscal year that we would revisit it.
Yep. So we are funding mobile squad computers. The only reason I'm highlighting that, even though it's not in yellow, is just that's what Clay is referring to. There are other higher priorities within his department. And so he agreed to reduce a couple of those lines to get some of those other higher priorities. So at this point, the capital expenditures, if all of those items in yellow are maintained by you, we'd be at about $4,657,000 of capital expenditures for next year. This
So
past,
Wendy,
Yep.
let's back up and just, I want to mention real quick, just so the committee remembers, the $280,000, that is statutorily required. So we don't have a choice on that. And then the tasers, we bought some during the fiscal year, if you remember, per John's request, and that was for patrol officers. These are 4 tasers to have available in corrections.
Correct.
So,
Currently, we only have 1 taser available for 3 correctional officers on duty. And, Murphy's Law, that person that's involved in the fight is not going to have the taser. So we just feel it as a safety issue and we need to arm them all. And then we'll have extra for a transport.
So scroll back up if you could, please.
How far?
And there was one other thing I wanted to mention. Okay, so in highway, we've got $500,000 carved out there. That was for acquisition of property. And that, we could probably have a conversation with Dave as far as, because I think that's going to come in much lower than $500,000.
so Jim, just so you know, that reflects, we were thinking the purchase of land would happen in this budget year. So that's the
Right.
million. And then next year was going to be some of the site testing, environmental testing that needed to be done. That was a request from Dave. Not that you can't have a conversation with him, but I just wanted to clarify that that included more than just the purchase of the land.
Right. Yeah, we might revisit that before we get this.
Finalized, okay.
I don't know why, when we went through our pass-throughs, I should have thought to see if Dave would be comfortable in reducing that a little bit, even $50,000 or whatever.
Anything else, Jim?
So as the committee sees, this is probably, we've been, I think last year we ran for the things that we did, which column would that be?
Existing fiscal year, this is where we're at. This is the year prior.
Yeah, so you can see, we had intentions of spending, I'm just trying to remember, Bob always made the comment when he was finance chair that we always tried to spend a little over $1 million in capital. Well, we're looking at 4.6. So, but I just want to remind the committee that a good chunk of that is ARPA dollars that we put into capital. And the same for the tentative next year's budget line item, that 3.5. And once again, depending on, maintenance department and how soon they're able to get things moving across the street, hopefully we'll be able to maintain schedule and get these things done this fiscal year.
And to give you an idea what we budgeted for that project across the street, let's see here.
It was 2 million, 2.5. So
And 2.5.
$4.5 million.
Mhm.
And-
One other thing I forgot to, sorry to interrupt your thought, Jim,
No,
but
it's
I
all
do
right.
want to point out that I added onto this list, even though we do not have a dollar amount, 2 items. Circuit clerk's case management system that she's been talking to us about for 4 to 6 months now. And then also Judge Ackert has last year and this year again requested some capital dollars for, again, the flooring in those courtrooms, build out of a jury room, and another courtroom move from my 3rd to 4th floor. She is not tagged a dollar amount to that because she doesn't know how to calculate that, of course. She's also exhibiting some patience because she knows that the HVAC system has to be the priority. But we've got some things that have been identified and requested for that aren't even considered in this because we didn't have a dollar amount to assign to it.
Now, the management system, the case management system, a large amount of that is paid for out of the fund that Amy oversees.
I think that was our intent.
Yeah, yeah. And as I remember, the fund balance there is about $1.2 million. So. And Amy is supposed to get to us some estimates as far as where, and what they're contemplating on that, just again, as a reminder to the committee, because and this is all fresh in my mind because I just had this conversation with Judge Ackert, and that was the system that they have currently is basically being phased out, and Winnebago County is the only one that in our circuit that is on the same software that we are, and they would like to, and it's not being supported anymore. And we used to kind of tag along with Winnebago for system updates. Well, they're not doing it anymore, and so the rest of the circuit is, and I can't remember the name of the software, but it's the rest of the circuit is on that, so we'll be congruent with their system. But we don't have a price estimate for our county as yet, and Amy's supposed to be working on that. All right, does the committee have any? So you see the amounts there. Does the committee have any questions in regards to capital fund, where we're at there? What is there anything that you have questions with, want information on? Well, that was simple. You're escaping without being eviscerated there, Mr. Maintenance Committee member. Or I should say Vice Chairman. Was there anything there you see there, Dean, that? Right. Right. Okay. All right. Well, we'll call capital done. Is there anything else? We don't have to revisit highway. We've done highway. Is there anything else that we need to before we move into executive session? Yeah, Larry.
I'm sorry, I do apologize. I should have asked this when we were talking about Clay's budget.
Sure.
But I don't want to open up any old wounds here, but because we've discussed this for the last 5-6 years, I'm only looking at the numbers at $240,000 over overtime. I've said this before. I know we've had the issue of what I just still have not gotten an answer that I understand. Why would it not be better to hire a couple more deputies so we can drop this number down and we don't have to do this every year? With just looking at the
Clay,
numbers, not as
So
technicality.
here, let me take a stab at it. And if I got it all
140,000.
wrong, you can chime in. Clay, we could, or Liram, we could put in his budget 2 more officers.
Mhm.
His issue is that as far, and this is, that might help us next fiscal year. The issue is the time that it takes between you put out there and you do the interview process, application, unless it's lateral transfer, and if you remember from the last committee meeting, Clay had the request of bringing somebody, he has a potential for a lateral, which eliminates the need for that potential new employee to come on as, without going to the academy and all that. Come over, boom, is on the job the next day. The time it takes between having the authorization of more headcount and actually getting them on, we're probably into, even if we did it today, would we probably be in March?
Takes about 8 months to get a correctional deputy hired, trained, and on their own through field training. And then, because the Corrections Academy is 8 weeks in length, and the Law Enforcement Academy is actually 16 weeks in length. So it takes about 10 or 11 months before you can get somebody hired at the academy and then field training where they're on their own answering calls by themselves.
Because I realize that we will always have the overtime, but, I don't know, I have people that ask all the time, the constituents ask, are you paying $240,000 in overtime? That's a lot of money.
Mhm.
Or the other issue.
Wouldn't it be more beneficial to have more bodies, more people in there than,
Well, the other part of the equation is that the retention issue, especially in things have changed dramatically in the last couple of years, trying to get anybody even to apply in law enforcement because it's been so vilified. But that's one thing, the retention issue, if you can retain people and keep them, that reduces your overtime. That's something we're trying to accomplish through the negotiations. And if we can get that done, which is going to be expensive for the county, but we have to be competitive. It's like private business almost. We have to be competitive with other people that are hiring and stealing our deputies. And if we can get that addressed through negotiations and keep that will drive overtime down too.
well, I
So-
understand that. I
so
see
that-
Rochelle and Dixon PD and Rochelle PD, what they pay their deputies and what county pays. Even Ogle County is not even close. So I understand that,
Yeah.
but I just look
But
at
that
the
drives your
number. I look
overtime down,
at
too.
240,000
Yeah.
equals to me at least a couple more employees. And just,
But
And I-
you're always going to have.
You're always going to have
You're
overtime.
always going to have,
Yeah.
you have training absences, you have sickness absences, you have vacation absences. So ideally, if you have 4 deputies on the road, you're almost always going to have 3 because someone's almost always off throughout the year. So I mean,
Well, you also have
Medical
the
situations.
holidays.
A lot of
The
variables.
holiday days, those are paid days off, but you got to have people covered. And I think the folks that are covering those paid holidays, That's overtime. That's automatic overtime dollars, isn't it? Doesn't that go to overtime or not?
No, they get
That
a
does-
holiday check to cover those days.
Those are the holiday, that's.
the holiday
okay.
pay,
All right,
yep.
I was always a little confused on that.
And it also depend on where you're short. If you're short in corrections, which you have been a lot, or if you end up short on the road for whatever reason. So do you hire the corrections or do you hire the deputies? I mean, it can shift, which it has dramatically. But I think the answer right now is in our retention and through the negotiations. And, you know, if that still doesn't work, then you always have that option to add.
And I don't have a problem with his employees getting the overtime because they're working, they're stretching out. I'm nothing on that issue, you know, and it goes towards their pension, towards their wage. It doesn't matter. Just that I only look at the number, the big number here, because we've always had this issue for the last 5-6 years that I've been around.
Right. Okay. Is there anything else? Paul, is there anything else
Thank you.
we need to cover before we go in executive session?
Not to my knowledge.
Wendy? Ready to go? All right. And you're going to be able to hold Ally on? And Paul's got to go. Yeah, okay. All right, are you ready? Yeah, I need a motion to go in exec session, moved by Bivens, seconded by Kitson. All those in favor, or no, roll call.
Roll call. Jim Sheeline.
Yes.
Mike Book.
Yes.
Tom Kitson. Yes. Lyram.
Yes.
Tim.
Yes.
Nancy.
Yes.